Good evening. I want to welcome everyone to our January 16th District Advisory Council meeting, and I now call the meeting to order. Our first order of business, hopefully everybody received the agenda in the packet, a copy of the minutes, and an opportunity to review that. And at this time, I would be happy to either entertain a motion for approval of the minutes, or if anybody has any question, or not questions, but corrections to the minutes that they want to raise, we entertain those as well. Yes, ma'am.
You were here. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any corrections, or if not, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve the minutes with the suggested correction.
Motion to approve the suggested corrections.
John.
And do I hear a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. That'll move us now to public comment on any from any non-DAC members on any of the agenda items that we have for this evening. Seeing as we have none, I will turn it over to Ms. Gittens for a board update.
Do I need to stand up or can I sit?
I don't know if that mic is hot. If your mic works, you can do it from wherever you like.
It's not.
If it doesn't work, I'll give you this mic.
Now get out.
You can stay there if you like.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here and representing your schools. First, I think I will just address the elephant in the room because it's easy to do that. There are all kinds of things. You'll probably see things on the news this evening as well about information about our meeting tomorrow. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the Caloosahatchee B, we will be having a board workshop. At the workshop, we don't have public comment. It's an opportunity for us to kind of talk to each other because Sunshine Law, I can't just go up to Chris when she comes through and, okay, well, what do you think about such and such? We can't do that. We have to talk so that it's in the public. So tomorrow we will be doing that. The topics are online. If you go to board docs, you can see the things we're going to be talking about. And I urge you in the future to go to that site, see what we're doing. If you see a topic that's of interest to you, either tune in. The action meetings are live, the briefings are live, and the workshops, you will see this one tomorrow by Friday. So there's all kind of rumors and things going on. Basic answer to the rumor is no. And figure that out, however you want to say it. We will get together and discuss things that we need to discuss, and everybody will be privy to it. When I ran for office, one of the things I ran on was being transparent, and I hope to do that. If you have any questions that we don't answer for you, make sure that you contact me. Now, as far as DAC, this has been a long road. I sat there and here over the years, and so this is really a pleasure to sit here and actually be the liaison from the board with DAC. It's near and dear to my heart. We're going to talk about tomorrow the advisory boards, and some things may come up that may affect this board as well. And when we do, I will bring that back and discuss it with you and get your input as well. Nothing is done until everybody has their input and we have all decided as a unit what's going to happen. I am so happy and proud to be here. Thank you for those out there from District 5. Where's District 5? Anybody District 5 out there? Okay, woo woo, thank you. Okay guys, we're gonna have a good, I can't say year because we're halfway through it, but any questions or anything that you have, anything I can help with, please let me know, and thank you. Oh, you guys.
Now the district has something called a site selection committee, and we have traditionally, when the school district is going to look to select a new site, they request representatives from this committee, 2 from each zone, to attend site selection committee meetings. And to tell us just a little bit more about that, we have Ms. Huff. And what I'd like you all to start to think about as Ms. Huff talks to us is we're going to need 2 representatives from each of the zones. So if it's something you might be interested in when you hear what she's talking about and participating in meetings, start thinking whether that's something you'd like to volunteer for, because we'll be looking for 2 people from each zone to represent our committee.
Good evening. As he said, I'm Dawn Huff, and I'm the long-range planner for the school district. So one of my responsibilities is coordinating the efforts of purchasing and selling property for the district. And we've just, a few months back, we obtained a broker to go through our properties and, you know, the list of inventory to look to see what would be best to sell based on the location, where it's not conducive for students or transportation reasons. So in this process, we're looking to sell property, which you'll be informed of those, but that's not necessarily, we don't need a committee to approve anything the district really sells, because, you know, it's not beneficial to the district for the most part. What we do need assistance on, and required by board policy 9.01, is a site selection committee, which is a makeup of 3 members from the DAC Equity Diversity Advisory Committee and your committee as well. We need 6 members from your committee, and like he said, 2 from each zone is preferable, but you know, we'll take anybody who's willing to participate in that. The meeting we're looking to set up is February 19th. It'll be in the evening, so it's usually convenient for everybody to attend. And at that point, we'll bring you, at this point, we only have 1 parcel that we're looking to purchase. So we'll bring that one. We'll inform you of another one that we're selling, but really your not really your opinions, but your support for the properties that we're looking to purchase is what we're looking for, and we'll bring those to the board. They do look at your recommendations or your comments when we look to purchase property. We'll bring you information regarding the location, the number of students that it will, you know, that could impact the site. They're not always necessarily for a school. They could be for ancillary facilities. The one we'll be bringing will be potentially for a school. So at this point, we just need you to vote on 2 members from each zone, like I said, preferably, but I'll let you go ahead and take care of that. Thank you.
Can you tell us what zone the property is in?
The property is in the south zone. Excuse me.
So why don't we, since the property we're looking at is in the south zone, why don't we start?
Want this one?
So since the property is in the south zone, why don't we start with that and see, do we have 2 folks from the south zone that would like to participate in the site selection committee? Absolutely.
Property, we will ask this of you again in the next month or 2. They'll probably be within the next, I would say, 6 months, maybe 3 to 5 parcels that, excuse me, that we're looking to purchase. So I would look for that in the next in a couple months, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same members each time.
So do we have 2 members from the south zone that would be interested in attending the February 19th meeting on behalf of, I see we have 1. Is that 2?
Is that a question?
Are all of you from the south zone? Are you all volunteering? Is that? Okay, so I guess if you folks want to come forward, we have 2 options. I've seen this done both ways in my years on DAC. If the 3 of you want to agree on 2 of you, we can do that, or we can take a quick vote and pick 2 of you that way. I've seen the folks work it out themselves. Like sometimes people say, oh, if you really want to do it, I'll step back. If all 3 of you really want to do it, we'll do a quick vote here. Are all 3 of you really interested in doing it? Great, so we have 2. Sir, your name is? Adam Dalton from Pinewoods Elementary, and ma'am? Jeanette Scolia from Orange Woods. Thank you. You're our 2 representatives from the South Zone. Now we'll do the West Zone. Can I get 2 representatives from the West Zone? I see 1 hand. Can I get a second hand? Somebody? Oh,
Just state your name real quick.
Jessica Doan, Diplomat Elementary.
okay. And the second one? There we go. Okay. And our third and final zone, we have Andy Erickson volunteering. Do we have 1 or more other folks that are also interested in doing it? We have 2 gentlemen. Are you both? There we go, sir. You look like he stepped back, so it's you. Charlie Morris from Orange River. There we go. And Cassandra can assist you with email addresses and that kind of information. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to our presentation on differentiation from Dr. Wanda Creel.
Actually, it's the team that's going to be doing the presentation, and they're going to come up now. We have our Director of Elementary Curriculum, Bethany Crisberry, our Director of Secondary Curriculum, Laurie Halshin, our Assistant Director, Candace Alavedo. Thank you. We have our Director of ESE, Jessica Duncan, our Assistant Director of ESE, Teresa Bowen, and our Director of ELL, Evelyn Riviera, excuse me. Okay, here we go.
Good evening. I'm Lori. I'm starting us off. So we were asked to do a presentation tonight on differentiation. What I hope that you get from the presentation is how hard our teachers work to service our students who come with us with varying needs, both students that are very high level, students that are coming from countries where they have never been in school before, to gifted students. So the needs vary in our classes, and our teachers work really hard. And we work hard too to support them in those efforts, and they give us lots of great ideas about how to do that. So we're going to kick off. So what we decided to start with is this is a standard in English language arts that has proven to be challenging for our students across the board. So I wanted to show you a breakdown of the standards, because the thing in education is there's a lot of acronyms and numbers and letters, and so you have to be pretty on your toes to understand what it means. So the LAFS stands for the Language Arts Florida Standards. The 7 is grade 7. The RI stands for Reading Informational Text, and we have an RL as well for Reading Literature. Standard 3 means the cluster. There are 5 clusters that our standards go into that category. Cluster 3 for the reading standards proves to be the most difficult, and then the 9 indicates which standard we're talking about. So this standard, for students to master this standard, they need to analyze how 2 or more texts address similar themes or topics in order to build knowledge or to compare the approaches the authors take. So that takes a lot of analysis, and most of the standards today have analysis requirements, whereas before in the old standards, very few, I'd say less than 20% of the standards had analysis, and now more than 80% of the standards have analysis. So the rigor is much more aggressive. And so the next slide will show you, this is kind of a breakdown. If I were in the classroom, these are all the things to teach a lesson and to make sure they master this standard that I would have to do with all different text types. So they would have to determine the central idea, and that's a new term since the standards started, and in kindergarten through 5th grade, they're identifying the main idea, but the central idea is over a larger piece of text. So I'm kind of older, so I was taught to outline. So an outline, that would kind of be your Roman numeral, right? So that's kind of what the central idea is. And it's pretty hard because there's a lot of different topic sentences or main ideas that come together, and they have to do the overarching idea. Then they have to determine that, they have to know like which supports in the text let them know that they're on target and that's the central idea. And then when they're doing that, they have to determine whether or not the supports that they're picking, are they relevant to that central idea and reasonable. And then they do that for each text so that they can compare and contrast both texts to see how those authors like came to the central idea. Did they do it the same or did they do that differently? So you can see there's a lot involved with this standard. This is a standard that we continue to work on as we build across text, and our students, it's pretty challenging for our students. So imagine having a variety of learning styles and things and trying to do all of these 5 things to get at one standard. It's going to take some time for us to be able to build that capacity, and our students are working really hard at it. One of the supports that we provide teachers, because the standards are still like in their 4th or 5th year, so they're still pretty new, is we provide them a progression. So you'll see that at the top is just the standard language that we went over, but at the very top is what that standard looks like at the 11th and 12th grade, and then goes all the way down to what that looks like at kindergarten. And then the bolded words are when the standard slightly changes. And you can see those changes are rigor, then more rigor, then extensive rigor. So it just really moves through. And this is very helpful for a teacher, and it's actually really helpful for me in planning, because if I know kind of what reading level my students are coming to me with, then I kind of am able to say, I tried this at grade level and the student was very successful, so what does it look like at the next grade level? How can I push that student? Or that student wasn't successful when I've taught this and tried to get them to mastery, so where are they successful? So are they successful at the 5th grade where it stays at main idea and they can do the main idea for each of those and now just have to work on compare contrast, you know, or do they really, when it's several main ideas and they have to come over the overarching central idea, is that the gap? So this is very helpful in a teacher making decisions and walking up and down with the standard but staying on task. This is a sample question just so you know that our students have a state assessment beginning May 1st this year, so we have a little more time to prepare them to be able to do this standard. And this is just a sample question just so that you kind of see what they're up against. So they have, in this case, they have 3 passages, which is not atypical. We've had writing tests at 4th grade that have as many as 5. It's a lot. So they have multiple texts, and then they have to decide out of those lists, did they find those ideas in both texts, in both 2 and 3, passage 2 and 3, or just passage 2, or just passage 3. And then this typically has a follow-up question that a part 2 a lot of times I've seen that will ask them what supports let them know that. So it's, you know, pretty challenging. And then in our curriculum map, which is kind of, we have academic plans, we've had those for years that kind of ensure that we have some mobility where we have students moving from schools to schools. So what's really challenging is if a teacher isn't staying with the same standards across that grade level, across the district, then as if they come into my classroom and a teacher has taught completely different standards and I have this kid, then they won't have the same information building up to that standard progression that my students have been having. So we have these curriculum maps and these academic plans that give them somewhat of a pacing. They can stay like around 2 weeks ahead, 2 weeks behind, but it lets them know what standards that they should be addressing. So they might be doing this differently with different text and different resources, but the standards that they're addressing should be the same. And then so you'll see that in the curriculum map that it tells them the standard, it tells them the instructional guide is like a really, really rich lesson plan that we provide that they don't have to use, but that they can use as a guide if they needed to, or if they tried something and it didn't work and they want to see what another idea is, they can get information out of that. So that's on the left-hand side. Then you have the standards for that chunk of learning. And then I circled the objective or what the students need to do. We call those SWABOTs, students will be able to. And these are our goals for them to be able to do, and this is what we want them to know. And I just circled the ones that align to this standard because there are multiple standards in that learning chunk. We also provide an essential question. That essential question is typically standards-based, and what we ask teachers to do with essential question is it's kind of like keep your eye on the prize. And as you teach a little and they learn a little, how much of that can they answer now? How much of that can they answer now? You just keep moving forward. And then typically we try to do some type of assignment at the end that really lets them use all of that knowledge, and in this case it's a writing assignment. So Bethany.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Bethany Quisenberry. I'm the Director for Elementary Curriculum and Instruction. So we used a 7th grade standard, but I'm going to talk to the elementary level just a little bit because it's a little different. Once you get into middle and high school, you know, your kids have classes. So their classes are typically based on their academic need, and so they have some double blocks and different things. And so in the higher grade levels, you're able to a little bit more stay in at the same pace with some exceptions. In elementary, you get 18 to 22 babies, and sometimes they're all on completely different levels. You'll have one that's monolingual, and you'll have one that's reading on a 12th grade level. And so how do we differentiate for that? In elementary, in all of their master schedules, they have a 90-minute reading block and then a 60-minute intervention block for reading or enrichment. A lot of schools walk to read for that. A lot of schools just differentiate in their classrooms. It's a school-based decision. And then for math, there's at least a 60-minute block, and then during that block, there's differentiation time for small groups and as well as science, because you have to, in elementary, you're teaching everything, right, in the school day, and so you still have to differentiate not just in reading, but in math and in science as well. So this is a, you know you have to differentiate for your kids. We have different data checks such as STAR. They have formative assessments as well as the teacher-made assessments in their classrooms that tell the teacher exactly where that child's need is, where you need to enrich them at, or where you need to reteach. And so the instructional guides have those activities or those resources built in. I'm getting old, Lori, because I can't see that far away. So in each instructional guide, which is the lesson plan that she was referring to, there are learning activities that are built in. So if you picture that 90-minute block, they're going to teach the rigor of the standard for the beginning to their students, and then they're going to break up to make sure that they're differentiating, still staying on that standard. As you saw with that progression, it goes all the way down to kindergarten. The neat thing with our standards is it goes K to 12. So I don't have to say, oh, this kid needs this, which is completely different off from everything else that's in reading, with the exception of the pre-primer skills, which is going to be sight words, phonological awareness, phonics, those types of things. Some of our younger babies are going to need that, but when they get into the actual standards, you're able to just move on that progression. And that's something that we're really emphasizing and pushing out PD and trying to train the teachers of how do you make sure that you know where that child falls in that standard so that you're really meeting those students' individual needs. The instructional guides that we use that we're able to help to assist in that we push out from the district level gives them those resources because they don't always have the time to go and to try to find all of those things to be able to use with their students. So in the instruction, this is fine, you can go. In the instructional guide on the towards the end, it goes into what do I do if my students did not learn this standard, so they've taught the standard for a couple of days, sometimes a week, sometimes 2 weeks. They give whatever their progress monitoring is, and the student still did not learn it, what do I do? So we build in these activities for teachers to be able to pull from, and then on the other side of that, this student learned it, and they're good, what do I do to extend it? So instead of giving those students something, again, completely different, you move up in the progression of the standard, and you begin to enrich them based off of where their need is. Yep. And ELL.
Hi, I'm Carla Huck, and I work in the ESOL department. Evelyn and I worked with curriculum this past summer to bring our ESOL lens to the curriculum maps and instructional guides. So you'll see at the top of all the maps, there is a link that says ELL resources. When you click on it, you get one of these long papers I showed you, the digital version, where we've given you a copy of the 6 to 8, since that's the standard we're looking at tonight. That is actually based on the WIDA standards and the can-do philosophy, can-do descriptors, which is looking at ELLs at asset-based, what can they do, what are the assets they have, rather than deficit-based. Florida's a WIDA state, so we use the standards. 38 other states use them as well. When you click in here, you will see by domain what students at each level of language proficiency can do. So along the top, a student who's just entered the country, has limited English, may have scored a 1. So you will see in listening what they are expected to do in the classroom and what supports we recommend the teacher then use to scaffold, so the students have the same access to curriculum as the other students. If you look down your paper, we have listening, speaking, and then on the back, reading and writing. So whichever domain they're working in the classroom, we know what to expect from the student based on their proficiency level. We're about to give the Access for L's 2.0 annual assessment now in February. It's given once a year. That's where we get the scores. You see at the top, they range from 1 to 6. So every year, the teachers look in their rosters. Actually, we have a link here, student language levels. That clicks in to a document that shows them how to run reports, run focus reports, and find students' scores who've previously taken the test. Then they can see they may not have the same score in each language domain, and they can align their instruction to the can-do descriptors. I'm going to take it from
My name is
a little
Evelyn
more.
Rivera, ESOL Director. Good evening. As Carla mentioned, the right link takes the teacher into the step-by-step directions on how she can find out the level of language proficiency of her students. And then for each student, this teacher then will look into the corresponding domain, if it's either listening, speaking, reading, or writing, and then find the activities and resources to support the acquisition of English language proficiency, and also the student is also demonstrating proficiency on the standard. The left link is resources for teach for support, and it has all those activities that are in the on red font and with more details. For example, if we have graphic organizers for the students at different proficiency levels, then the click on that link will take the teacher to different graphic organizers. If we then also, this link takes the teacher to a playlist. A playlist is a collection of different strategies, and they're housed in what is called Safari Montage. And if you can see, we selected a few of these resources for this particular standard that we're highlighting tonight. Since we're using comparing and contrast today in tonight's standard, one of the strategies that we have chosen has to do with signal words for comparing and contrast, which is very important for English language learners to understand and demonstrate proficiency on that specific standard. We also, for the monolingual students, we have also assistance in the native language. The teacher can use either an ESOL paraprofessional for that support. Also, there's Google Translate, and there's also some resources that can provide translation for the students. Also, we have, for another more advanced level of language proficiency, we have, for example, guided notes. We also have reciprocal teaching. This is a strategy where the student becomes an expert on a content, and then he or she is able to then teach a small group of peers on that specific content. Also, we have differentiated graphic organizers and also sentence frame to facilitate the conversation in the classroom. Sometimes students have some language proficiency, but not enough to volunteer answers. So then those sentence frames provide the language that the student needs to participate actively in the classroom discussions. We also provide SIOP strategies, and SIOP stands for Shelter Instruction Observation Protocol, and this is a framework for instruction. It's a collection of wonderful, proven, effective strategies that are effective for ELLs and for non-ELLs. Okay, this is the part of ESOL, so if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask any questions now or later. Thank you. Now with ESE.
So you've seen the curriculum map, and at the top of the curriculum map, just like there are the ELL resources, there's also a link for ESE resources. So when a teacher clicks on that link, they're going to get one of 3 areas, because in the state of Florida, exceptional student education covers gifted as well as students with disabilities. So you'll see a page for resources for gifted, and for our 2 types of students with disabilities, those that are working on the regular Florida standards and those that are working on our alternate access standards. So in supporting gifted students, the important thing to remember here is that gifted students are working on the same standards that all of our other students are working on, and they need to master those standards. And just because they are a student that is gifted, it doesn't mean that they've already mastered the standard. So the teachers are going to be teaching those standards, and as Lori showed you, that progression chart is very helpful for our teachers because they can see how they can enrich that standard for those that already have the standard mastered. And so that is really the part of gifted education that exists in our state, is to extend that essential curriculum. An example of a support that's used by teachers is an extension menu. So it can be provided in many different ways as a follow-up activity, a culminating activity at the end of a unit, or as an independent anchoring activity before or after their work is completed. And that gives them options of sometimes more project-based learning, of things that they can do to extend their understanding of that standard and move forward.
So our students with disabilities are served with an individual education plan, and through that plan they may have accommodations, but they are expected, if they are on standard assessment, to meet these same standards and demonstrate mastery. So through these accommodations, they can have those in a number of ways, through presentation, response, setting, scheduling. So some that you might be really familiar with are extended time, but they may have things like color coding. They may be able to respond orally instead of in a written format. So there's many things they can do, but they do have to show that they can meet the standard. For students that have severe cognitive disabilities, they may meet the standard through access points. So it's aligned with the Florida standard, but in this case, the material can be modified. So how they show or what they show mastery of could be different than the Florida state standard. They are working at a different level.
So an example of how this is carried out in the classroom is that our educators combine good teaching strategies with the accommodations. So one of the strategies that is proven to be very effective with students with disabilities, especially those with specific learning disabilities, is explicit instruction. So that teacher would be doing modeling of that, what was expected of the student. So and speaking and talking exactly about who, what, when, where, why, providing that instruction very explicitly while they're doing it. And then they're going to be doing a directed practice with the group of students. It may be a smaller group or it may be the larger group. And so that happens before then we're actually having the student do some independent practice on their own. And they combine that with accommodations. So it's not just the teaching strategy alone, but then we're folding in accommodations to that. So the example that we're using of the standard and that piece that we had a little earlier, some things that would be common in this area would be pre-teaching of vocabulary that was going to be in those passages, as well as color coding that could be used in many different ways, whether it's through color coding beforehand in the passages or even during the work and the activity.
So as we've heard tonight, differentiation can come in various different forms. We've found that the differentiation can be based on whether a student has mastered the standard or whether the student has not mastered the standard. We've found that differentiation can be included on whether a student has language acquisition or if they need additional support, or if they need accommodations in order to be able to access the standard in various different levels. So whether a student is gifted and what that extension is. So what we've tried to do this year is to look at our teachers and recognize that we're providing differentiation to our students as we provide differentiation to our teachers. With the curriculum maps, when we talk about, in some of our language, we talk about what's tight and what's loose. And what's tight about our curriculum maps is that just like we have the standards, we've taken those standards that all of our students are responsible for, and we have taken them and done through progression of what our students need to learn throughout the year. That's what our students are going to be held accountable for, and that's what our teachers need to make sure that our students have been exposed to. So with those curriculum maps, what we've done is we've taken the information that we've received on what are foundational standards, what are standards that our students are held accountable for most during the year. And although it may seem that we've done a little tweak to the progression of how standards may have been taught previously, or even how they might be presented in a book, remembering that books are created that don't necessarily meet Florida's standards, but to meet a multitude of states' standards. So they're not necessarily just done in the progression that Florida provides their standards. So with that, we have created curriculum maps that say these are our foundational standards and these are the standards that we're going to utilize the most, and then we move throughout the rest of the year so that we've had an opportunity for students to be exposed to their standards prior to the time that they're going to be held accountable for them. The instructional guides are provided, one, they were written with the intent of our new teachers and our career changers. But with that in mind, they're a great resource for our veteran teachers, because what we are hoping with these, and hope is not a strategy, so our plan was with the instructional guides is that they could serve as a resource not only for our new teachers and for our career changers, but for our veteran teachers to be able to use in conversations collaboratively with other teachers. To be able, when we say, if a student isn't understanding or mastering the standard, what might we be doing? What might we do in a different strategy? And instead of teachers having to necessarily come up with things on their own, we've provided those, but we certainly haven't taken away the opportunity for teachers to be able to input that on their own. In fact, one of the statements that we've made from a differentiation standpoint, and you can compare it with gifted children, oftentimes our teachers that are veteran teachers that may have already mastered that, they have the opportunity to create their own lesson plans based on the students that they have in their class. So what you see is we're trying to model for our teachers that sometimes it takes accommodations for our new teachers in order for them to be able to access the standard, or for our career changers, we've got to figure out if they're not able to understand how to do this, and maybe they haven't even had training on being a teacher, then we need to give them the strategies. But if this person is a gifted teacher, then this is a resource that they can use if they need it, and it's also extensions there to help carry on conversations within their classrooms. So the information that you've been provided today is really looking at how we meet the needs of our students by providing resources to our teachers and our administrators. There was one key thing that Lori said to you at the very beginning, and it's really kind of the why behind our rationale for creating these resources. In a district this large, we need to create systemic and systematic approaches to ensure that our students are having equitable access to instruction and that our students have the opportunity to not have gaps in their learning. And with that, if a child, and they often are, we do have many children in our district that move 1 month in one school, and when the rent is done, they're moving to another school, and when the rent is done, they're moving to another school, and so forth and so on. And if we have a child who oftentimes in that particular case is our most at-risk learner, if we have a child that's moving from school to school to school, if we're not staying on a similar pace, then that child is going to have gaps in their learning. And in order to ensure that children who are our most at-risk children we're reducing the gaps in their learning, that's why we have the curriculum maps, so that no matter which school they're at, they may have a different approach to teaching information, and that is okay. But we can ensure that they've been exposed to the standards that they're going to be held accountable for in that grade, because we need our students to be on grade level so that when they go to the next grade level, we're not having to do remediation and go backwards in order to help them move forwards. That's the process that we have to get into in order to see more of our students able to graduate on time and be productive citizens in our community. So with that said, Candace is going to walk you through, as though you were a teacher, looking at some of these activities.
Thank you. So just like we ask our teachers to do and our students to do, you've heard a lot of information. You need time to actually process that information. And to process that information means it's now your turn to talk. So I get to be the one that makes sure you actually engage in conversations with one another. I know you love that at 7 o'clock at night, right? Yes, I see it. I'm not going to make you analyze 2 texts, though, I do promise. But I am going to bring it back to the standard that Lori started us out with this evening. And you have a sheet of paper that is titled LAFS 7RI 3.9. If you could grab that sheet of paper for me. And that brings it back to the standard and what we're asking a 7th grade teacher to do, knowing that in their classroom they have all different students and they need to be able to meet all of those students' needs. So you have a very small snippet of what a piece of a lesson plan could look like for a teacher. You've got the text there that we would utilize. You'll see there's 2 texts there and a media piece because we're trying to pull it all together. And then you're going to see our Cliff Note version of what could we do for our student who's exceeding, approaching, below, a monolingual, ESE, gifted. How do we meet all their needs in a very short block of time? So here's your task, because we've got about 3 minutes left together. You're going to get with the people around you, and each one of you is going to look through this lesson plan as one of those lenses. Now, if you were in my classroom, I'd assign you a lens and make sure you had an accountability piece and check in on your role. But I don't have all that time with you, so I'm going to trust you all in the honor system to look through those lenses. There's 5 lenses there. Take a minute to look through it, and then with the people around you, have a conversation around the 2 questions that are up there. After reviewing the differentiation needed to teach this standard, what does a teacher need to consider when planning? So before they can start, what are those considerations? And once they have those considerations, how should district, schools, and parents support our teachers in meeting those needs. Okay, so just to recap it, you're going to look over the snippets for your lens. You're going to engage in conversation for about 3 minutes on that lens, on what does the teacher need to plan for, and how can we support. And then we'll pull you back together. And yes, I will walk around to engage in conversation with you, because just like we ask our teachers to do, I need to make sure you're with me tonight, right? All right, turning it over you guys for 3 minutes. right, guys, if I could get you to come back together. Thank you. I tried. If I could get you guys to come back together. You guys are engaged in some great conversation. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that you engaged in conversation with me. I heard a sidebar comment of I flunked. Nobody flunked. I can help differentiate to meet your needs, and we'll get there together this evening. But with that, hopefully you got to see and hear some of the pieces that we try to put in place for our teachers. So they're not constantly digging and going, I don't know where to go. Or I have never had a classroom full of ELL learners. What do I do? We've tried to embed that in there. And then when I'm still floundering, I have my team. And when I go, I need more than my team, I can call and say, Evelyn, I need your help. Can you and Carla come out and help model for me? So when I am working with my students, knowing that we talk to teachers, it's important. I can't keep you all sitting here, whole group facing me all evening, because I'm gonna miss somebody at some point. How am I working to ensure that I'm pulling you in small group or coming over and having a conversation with you to make sure I'm meeting your needs, to make sure I'm pushing you to your highest potential, but also laying the foundation for if you have gaps? Because it's very evident we have students all over, and we need to fill the gaps, and we need to push to make sure we're getting there. So with that, we thank you for engaging with us, and we'll go ahead and I open it up for questions. So I believe I'm going to turn it back over to Scott to help navigate those questions this evening.
That's great. And if anybody has questions, if you could come up to one of the podiums, the mic should be hot at the podiums, and you can ask your questions there. And tonight I'm going to go get in line too, because I have a question.
Andy Erickson, Alva School. Now I know that the district is hiring new teachers every year. I mean, a lot of new teachers, and a lot of them have just come out of just college. Are you actually holding classes for them to show this differentiate and how to do it for them? Because it sounds like something they may not learn in college.
So the Professional Development Department, they have a new to teacher boot camp.
That's not on.
Okay.
It seems hot.
Here it is. Now it's on.
It's on. Oh, sorry.
Just kidding.
The Professional Development Department, they host new to teacher boot camp, but they have all of the different departments and divisions support in that. So for our side of it, we did, at first they opened it up to different levels, and now once a month we're continuing to push in. And so we show them where these resources are. And then in addition, we host workshops, but we also try to push out like little snippet videos. I know in elementary math, for example, in the instructional guides, they have little snippets of videos that kind of explain what it's supposed to look like. So it is a big learning curve for them, as you know. And I don't know if some of you may know what it's like to be a new teacher, but there's a lot of classes that they're taking to in our Apples program. For me, like I had to do a 300-hour ESOL endorsement. I did a middle grades endorsement. I could have my doctorate with all my endorsements. I have a reading endorsement. And they're also engaged in that as well. So with those classes though, like in my reading endorsement, I learned so much about differentiation. So some of those classes embed that as well. So we do try to support. They are overwhelmed. A lot of times it's side-by-side coaching as well. That helps.
Can I also add to that? One of the programs and initiatives that we're working on is the Grow Your Own, and the partnership with like FSW and FGCU, and trying to have that partnership so that we can embed the things that we need into the classes while the students are being taught. And we spoke before the legislature just yesterday to talk about asking them to help support us financially to have those type of things, to bring in our own teachers. And one of the things that I said was there's nothing like, and the teachers in the room will understand this, getting a phone call or an email from a student that you taught that wants a reference to become a teacher. And that's what the Grow Your Own helps us to do.
We also build collaborative cultures in our schools, so they have common planning time and they meet together as a team. It's overwhelming. As you can see, so much that a first-year teacher and a career changer is trying to learn, and you can only learn so much at one time. And so they meet with their other teachers. Some schools it's every week, some schools it's twice a week, some schools it's after school, some it's during the day, but they meet with their other teachers and they walk through this process and they walk through their planning so that they can share resources with each other as well.
Okay. Hi, Dante Chalfie, Fort Myers Technical College. I teach computer science, and I probably at any given time can have as many as 20% of my class as atypical learners at various points on the spectrum. Do you have any special tips for me?
Well, when we're considering learners who have different needs, we know that they're unique. So I couldn't give you a black and white answer, but we do have supports from our department. So if you are a teacher that wants somebody to come out and specifically give you some classroom tips, we can have a learning resource or one of our coordinators come out. Depending on what the student needs, it might be appropriate for them to have some type of assistive technology to support them in the class. So the best thing I could say is if you have a number of students and you're trying to meet a lot of needs, it would probably be best to get some on-site support, and then we can give you some really individualized recommendations.
Best to just contact your office, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Scott Hertz on behalf of Gulf Middle. I'll tell you what brought this topic up tonight was complaints that came up from our SACs and from our DAC members that, wondering how this was to be done, which I think you've answered wonderfully. I think there's a great presentation on how it should be done. But I think the burning issue is parents in a lot of situations do not feel this is what's happening. That there are too many classes where either the gaps are too wide in the students' abilities or the teachers are spending too much time trying to get the students to master the skills, and this differentiation isn't happening. I know at our school, at the SAC meeting, there were complaints particularly about the gifted classes and the higher students, and I heard that here at the breakout sessions from a lot of the parents and representatives, that particularly at the higher end, when the students have mastered this skill, they're then doing homework from another class. I'll talk about middle school. Elementary was different. Elementary, the classes, I think, were, at least at the elementary my children went to, they were much more leveled, and they didn't have as big of a gap in the students. And so that maybe they were more, it was easier to do this and to give enrichment. But in middle school, they're doing homework from other classes, or they're just given another assignment. They're just said, hey, open Compass and do this. And it's the same type of problem. Or if it's math, they're just given some more problems to do at the same level of complexity. They're not getting that growth or enrichment. So I wonder, how are you monitoring this? And what are you doing, to address the problem of, is the differentiation too great? Is it too much to ask of a teacher? Or what are you doing to find out if teachers aren't doing it? Why aren't they doing it? How do you get them to do it? That's what I think the big concern is. But it's wonderful to see that you have the tool set. That's certainly step one.
So one of the things that we want to make you aware of is that just this week, one of our topics that we've been having during data chats, where principals have come in and all of these people and others have been sitting together, is that we've brought up the topic of differentiation. And we've found schools that are doing it really well, and we have found schools that maybe could use some additional support in continuing to expand their knowledge of that in the schools. So with that, when we find a school that's doing it really well, we like to use that school as a model and take teachers in so that they can see how that's happening. It's awfully hard to help a teacher to truly just tell them what to do. So it's easier to help a teacher see how that's done. We have people from our academic services team that go into classrooms and model lessons. We have coaches that are in schools that are modeling lessons. Full disclosure, we have a walkthrough that we do not to do anything other than to serve as a formative assessment of what's going on in our schools at any given time. We've done over 2,300 walkthroughs this year of just quickly going into a classroom, determining what we're seeing, coming back out and having conversations with leaders at their schools. One of the things that we're seeing that we continue to have conversations with our leaders about is that we need to increase the differentiation that's occurring in our classroom, and we need to continue to push the rigor. So the things that you're talking about, those are the pieces that we are working on to make sure that our teachers have the strategies, that they have the professional learning in order to do that, that we're modeling, that we're giving the opportunity to increase the awareness of schools that are doing a really good job of that, so that we can expand those opportunities throughout our district. I think that one of the things that we are seeing is helping our schools have the opportunity to have conversations and share what's working at one school to another school, and then allowing people to just collaborate and learn together. So that's what we are working to provide opportunities for here within our district.
Hello, my name is Amy Jane McWilliam, and I'm representing Island Coast High School, but I have 3 daughters, and they're in elementary, middle, and high school. So I'm looking at question 2, and I want to know, how can we support teachers? My elementary school teacher, I know exactly what she needs in the classroom. I know what she needs me to do with my daughter to help keep her on track. Middle school, it kind of, I don't get that. High school, I definitely don't get it. And so I'm relying on my children to talk to me, which sometimes happens last minute when we have a project due. So how can we support you? I have all these teachers here. Tell me, because I want to. I want to support you, and I want to support my child.
So for one thing, when you get to secondary, of which I taught, you're teaching a lot of students. And so the more information that you can bring forward about your child to that teacher, it is so welcome to know, like, are they mostly an auditory learner? Are they a visual learner? Are they hands-on with kinesthetic? You know, do they typically ace tests, but they hate doing their homework? You know, like, what kind of learner are they? Because it takes us a little bit, I would say 3 to 4 weeks to try to figure it out, of which if we had that information up front, we could just get rolling with them. So that's the first thing, is having those. Don't be afraid to have conversations with teachers about what kind of learner your child, you know, is. And then secondly, there's lots of opportunities to monitor their data now that, especially at secondary level, they have Chromebooks. And so taking a look at how they're doing, and there's lots of reports that show how they're doing towards standards. And, you know, kind of keeping an eye on that and having those conversations with your child about that. And that keeps, you know, us on our toes as well, and keeps them on their toes, so that if you see them slipping, that you may be asking, you know, what could I be doing at home? What kinds of things should they be doing at home, so that we can support that. And then anytime that, that you understand those standards, they have real life application at home, right? So watching movies, reading text. I can't say enough to please have your child read, because the older they get, the less they're reading, and it is an acquired skill. So just if I want to be, which you don't want me to be a basketball player, but if I wanted to be better, I would have to practice it. They have to practice reading, and so that's super important as well. So just staying involved with your kids and with your teachers, and having that communication. Like, we so appreciate parents that want to partner with us, and we will work hard to partner with you. So.
Okay, thank you. Parents also have access to the curriculum map, so if you want to go online and see what standards they're teaching and kind of the pacing to help them. I know that one thing, it's funny, I have the same age elementary, middle, high, and it's hard. There's something that happens when they leave and they go to middle and high that they forget how to talk to you. And so one thing is ask them, and instead of saying, how was your day, ask them, what standard are you learning in reading, or what standard are you learning in science, or what standard are you learning, to really get them thinking about what they're supposed to be learning, not just, oh, I don't know, we took notes, or I did something on Compass. Really start, really getting them to start thinking about that. But then pair that with, if you look at what they're supposed to be on and what standard they're supposed to be learning, so that you can start having those conversations with them.
So when my daughter's, in high school, or my other daughter in middle school, when they're being taught something, the teacher is saying, this is standard.
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah.
And it's posted on the board.
Oh, okay. All right. That's good to know. Because this is the first time it was kind of translated for me what it was, so anyway, good to know. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Quisenberry, can I jump in for just a minute? Yes. Not sure if my microphone's on. So I too have children, have had children at multiple levels, and one thing that I do that probably isn't the most popular, doesn't make me the most popular parent, but I do require that they open up their notebooks. We do it once a week. We do it on Sundays, and they open up their ELA notebook, and we talk about, sometimes I'm surprised, I find a STAR report in there. And so part of their requirement is, I know what the STAR report is, I'm a teacher, but they get to tell me about their STAR report. What is their progress? Where were they last time? So if you haven't had that conversation with your child, trust me, they know how to have it. So open up those notebooks, pick a day. We choose the weekends just because probably like you, our weeks are pretty busy, but we pull open those notebooks. They're dying the whole time. They're in middle and high. Well, the oldest is in college now, but the youngest is in high school, and he dies 1,000 deaths, but it's a way that I keep in touch with what's going on. My husband does as well when I'm not there, and we learn a lot by opening up those notebooks and having those conversations.
And the STAR reports are now in their Focus. So through their Chromebooks, you can have them go into Focus, or elementary, you have a Focus as well that you can access from home, and then you can get to their STAR report, and then it lays out. That's one of the progress monitoring pieces that the teachers use.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I was going to say, click down on the progress monitoring tab, because it doesn't just pop up. All right, thank you.
Hello, my name is Janine Nichols, and I'm from Ray Powdorf Elementary School. I teach 3rd grade ESE cluster, and we do a lot of differentiation, starting at the very basic and move up. And with the standards, for example, and thank you so much for the instructional guides and the curriculum maps. It really helps keep everybody focused and on track. The question is how can you support the teachers? Everything goes at a pretty quick pace, and because we have so much to do, when it's time to give the exemplars or the formatives, sometimes the questioning format trips our kids up a little bit, because you teach it with the story maps. You teach it with the way you're going to do it I'm getting nervous, I'm sorry. But when you're doing the thinking maps and you're teaching it that way, and then when they get on the test, instead of having that format for testing, then it's passage 1, passage 2, or both for the RI 3.9, where they're comparing and contrasting 2 stories on the same author or something like that. But the testing format is something that they really need to have extra practice with, so teachers have to come up and make worksheets basically just so that they could practice that format before you give them the test, so they don't bomb the test on format and not the concept. So I guess the question is there any way that there can be some kind of addition to the instructional maps where it has the format layout, so it has less work for the teacher that way?
So in the instructional guides, at the end of every learning activity are exit tickets. That is another additional way for you to progress monitoring and do a quick check of where they're at on that standard. And it's at a lower level than where the formatives are. So it's kind of like a check before the formatives. The formative assessments, for our parents that aren't aware, our formative assessments are quick progress monitoring that we have built in between the STAR on the standard. And they are rigorous because they're written to the rigor of the standard. And so they're written to also, especially in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, they're written to the format of FSA.
Right.
So that students are exposed to how that question is going to be laid out, because she's right, a lot of it is format. They might know the standard, but then when they get in there, and any of you that have taken, you know, assessments like SAT or ACT, you might know it, but you get in there and you don't really understand what it is that they're asking. That's why those formatives and the summatives, which are the exemplars, are written that way, is to help our students to have that exposure before they get to what they're going to be held accountable for. But for those quick checks, for more of what you're asking for, there's exit tickets at the bottom.
I know there's the quick checks, and I know that how to see if they know the thing, but I guess what I'm asking for is, when you're doing the next round of updates, is there any way of having some extra practice on the format itself so that it would make it a lot less work?
So one of the things we can recommend, though, and when we're out supporting and we're thinking about differentiation, is there's no reason when you're giving a formative, if you're trying to gather that data and check in and go, hey, we covered 3-9, how are we really doing it? Especially at elementary, since you're elementary and looking at for the elementary out there, the formatives that are available to you, you can pull them up on your smartboard or your whiteboard. And a lot of the things I would do, and when I worked with coaches, is say if it's a new item type that your children are going to run into the first time, to teach it right there and then. So you're not giving an answer away. You're not undoing their learning, but instead you're saying, wait, we gotta stop for a minute. This is new. What do we notice? What is it asking us to do? Okay, it's asking us to look at our 2 passages. We've been doing that through the week. But where now are our answer choices? They're at the bottom. Okay, so how are we going to get them from here to the appropriate passage 1, passage 2, and overlap? And make that an on-the-spot teachable moment. So not so much of a, I need more practice items like that, but take that one practice item and turn it into a teachable moment. Because now the next time they encounter that item, they're going to hear you and go, oh, I remember we did this and we made it a moment. So not so much more of the practice on the item type, but really that instruction on it.
Thank you. You made a lot of teachers very happy.
And we thank Dr. Krill and her team for coming out. It's my understanding they're going to stay and circulate through the breakout sessions. I know a couple folks had some additional questions. Also remember in your notebooks, if you didn't get one from outside, we do have the, I'll call them comment cards, but it's a card on which if you had an individual question or something that you wanted to submit, you can still do that. If it doesn't get addressed, you can put it on that card, as well as any topics that are appropriate from your group can come back from this. So at this time, I'd ask everybody to go to their breakout sessions. Elementary will be in D, training room D, which is just right outside the hallway here. If you go through the second set of, or through the left set of doors, my left, stage left set of doors, and the other 2 groups are in your same respective A and B as you've been.
Cindy emailed me.
new member, Lehigh Senior High School. You want to make sure you got his email on there. First number right as I start out. Here's our attendance. Thank you. And I'm going to keep this part of it. No, this is.
Bicycle. I was riding with my daughter, and she accidentally ran into me and
Over the handlebar.
broke the collarbone.
Okay. I remember one of that too.
Well, I let my buddy Cedric go chase down the middle school folks for us because it looks like they're still missing from training room B. Maybe we'll get started with our breakout reports from our high school group, who's right here and ready to go.
We had quite a discussion. It was a continuation of today's presentation. We, the first question was how to get to the curriculum maps as a parent. How do you get there? And they pulled up the information on that you can get to the curriculum maps through the parent portal on the website, and that probably need to rely on the schools to communicate it out a little bit better. And they're going to look to put it on all the school websites, not just the main district website. They were talking about whether or not getting parents involved on DAC. So we had Ms. Gwitten in there, and she said 10 years ago on DAC they had the same issues with getting parents involved, and how to change the mindset on how to get parents involved. There was an idea for a gimmick program like Donut with a Teacher to get parents involved. And then we talked about barriers to internet access, like with Sprint and Comcast availability. That also is on the website because those hotspots are available. We discussed putting the survey that had been put out to all the parents, and the quality of the wording. They thought the wording was a little bit confusing. And opportunity, that's also an opportunity for parents to get involved. Lori presented information on that was going into a newsletter. She shared with us an app that she uses for the Florida Standards, the Florida Standards app. And it's available to see what the standards actually says, as well as CPOMs. And floridastudents.org is a practice with feedback. A question was asked about plans for time slot with science at the elementary level with activities. And she reported that they had just started working on that with weekly webinars and hand-on activities in the elementary so that it carries on through to middle and high so that our children can be more competitive in the global economy. And she said it contained argument-driven activities. And concerning the ELL portion, they talked about how the state requirements that they've been talking with the state on how to reduce the requirements of putting students into the classroom, assuming they're going to be proficient in 1 year. Well, if they're not literate in their own language, they're going to have trouble being literate in English. And many of the students that come to the high school level, they may or may not have ever attended a high school or any school, much less be proficient in their own language. Not to mention, she talked about one school that had 14 different languages in a reading classroom and the challenges for the teacher doing that. That's it.
Thank you.
Now we can get our report from middle school. Okay, we can do elementary next. Somebody's hot to trot. That's fine. Here you go, elementary school.
That's the only reason why I said it. We had a good discussion with the group that was here, specifically in elementary. We had a question about the use of the new curriculum maps and showing growth. Yes, but different growth with different schools was the answer we had. We also had a mention that there's no reading materials in some of the homes, you know, with some of the kids, and what do they do about that? So they said there's elementary libraries, portable libraries being set up in some of the schools. They hope to get all the schools to be the same way. These are kids that do not have Chromebooks that I'm talking about. So that was part of it. And then one person asked, well, what time does the teacher get to look at the data? During planning time as team with an administrator. And instructional guides comment need models, full reading blocks, and there are videos of all math lessons being modeled. Then someone asked, are writing examples available? No, but the district is talking about collecting and putting them together. We also talked about the this group that we just heard from. A lot of them have started in 2018 early. So this planning and differentiation they've done has been done something that's been done very quickly. So there's some gaps in it, and there's some things to be taken care of, and they're working on it. That's it.
Thank you very much, Andy. Now we have Ms. Gossett with our middle school report.
Hi, good evening. We actually talked about quite a few things. We had all three of the ladies in the room with us. They pretty much answered all of our questions, and that's it.
Well, we have one satisfied breakout session, so we'll work on improving that for you other two groups to see if we can get you as happy as our middle school folks. So at this time, I'd be happy to entertain any public comment from non-DAC members. Okay. Anybody, DAC members, have any comments they'd like to make for the good of the order at this time? Be happy to entertain any comments for the good of the order. I would be happy to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Erickson? We have a second? All those in favor? Motion carries, and we'll see everybody, I believe it is February 20th, back here for our next meeting. Thank you.